Welcome to Parenting in the Age of Coronavirus, a new podcast by the Murdoch Children's Research Institute in Melbourne and proudly supported by Medibank. I'm Professor Julie Green from the Raising Children Network and the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, or MCRI. In this podcast series, I'll be joined by child health experts, and we're going to be talking about supporting parents and children and unravelling the challenges for parents during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's podcast is focusing on the wellbeing of primary school age children. And before we start, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're located on and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Today I'm joined by paediatrician and lead researcher Associate Professor Margie Danchin and Dr. John Quach, a Senior Research Fellow at MCRI and also from the Melbourne Graduate School of Education, where John works with teachers to investigate ways of supporting children's learning and development. Welcome Margie and John.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks for having me.
Well, COVID-19 has brought some very significant challenges for parents of primary school age children who may also have children of other ages at home. As we know, the primary school age years span ages from about 5 to 12 and a huge amount of development goes on during those years. Margie, can you give us some headline key developmental phases that happen in that window and that might be really relevant and helpful for parents who do have their primary school age children home full time at the moment?
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, I mean, it does span a very big age range, doesn't it, from 5 to 12, and a lot of development happens in that time. I think firstly, it's really important to realise that all children are going to react differently to events like this, and regardless of their age, we mustn't be afraid to discuss coronavirus with them, but to try and tailor those discussions that are much more sort of age appropriate. So for younger children, they really are expecting, more simple conversations where you're just really taking the cues from them and answering their questions. Whereas I think older kids often are a little bit more exploring and probing in their questions, and that we really need to be able to respond to that. So I think, and also realising that as kids get older, in grade 5 and grade 6, they have a greater sense of themselves and more independent, and also the power of their peer group. They're very much looking to their peers and also discussing the situation with their peers. So I think it's really important to try and tailor the communication to the age of the child, and also not to pretend that we have all the answers. Listen to what they're asking, and really try and address what they're concerned about. Particularly also correcting misinformation, because I think there's a lot of things that kids are not sure about what they're hearing, and they're really looking to us to try and help them to understand the situation.
Thanks, Margie. So to what extent do you take your lead from your child, would you say?
I think really it's really important to do that. I mean, I'm a mum of 4 kids. My children are aged between 10 and 17, and particularly the 10-year-old has been really asking lots of questions of quite a different nature to the older kids. So I'm very much taking her lead and trying to sort of address what she's most concerned about. And, importantly, we need to try and cover all of the aspects of the situation, from what this virus is, the symptoms of the illness, because they are quite frightened about getting sick themselves. So I've spent a lot of time explaining to my kids that for some reason children don't appear to get very sick from coronavirus, but that all of the measures, the social distancing measures that they are being asked to are to protect the most vulnerable in our community, particularly older people and their grandparents. And I think kids respond really well when it's explained to them clearly, and they're very keen to engage and to do the right thing. But I think, as parents, we have to be open and honest and also very reassuring and calm, because I think there's a lot of anxiety that our kids are showing that might not always be obvious straight away.
Thanks, Margie. There's lots of really valuable tips there. So here we are now, a couple of weeks down the track of children being at home full time with their parents, primary school age kids, and doing their distance learning with their schools. John, what advice do you have for parents to really help them support their children's remote learning as best they can, and given the multiple things that they also might be juggling, like running households and perhaps even working themselves?
Yeah, as you said, Julie, it's about doing the best you can, and that a really important thing for parents to remember is that what they're doing is not normal school. There is a reason why teachers spend so many years training and to understand how to teach children and what that looks like, and even how to understand when children are learning the materials there. So what we're doing is very different, and that it's acknowledging that what you're doing is not school is the really first important thing to know. The second is to keep in contact with your child's school. So whether that's via email or whether the school is doing daily communications, just that connection so that you can ask the teacher any questions and to ask for feedback and advice on if you're noticing anything about your child's learning each day that you might want some expert advice. And the next thing is really thinking about the routine. So school is a very structured environment where students have regular breaks, that they have a set routine and set lessons. And it's about how do you do some of those things at home. So I've got a child who's in grade 1 myself, and that we make sure that he's got regular breaks during the day, that he is able to have things such as recess and lunch where he can take a break, walk away from his activities, and to wind down and to, recharge. But we've also really talking to him, being able to give him some autonomy as well, so that each day we sit down and go through the activities that his school has provided, and that we give him some choice about where he wants to start and the activities that he wants to work on first. So really giving him some of that ownership around his own learning, but also really making sure that we praise his effort, and that we also help him talk through and work through things that he may have not got right the first time, and how he might be able to get the right answer the second time. So part of learning is not about getting things right the first time. It's a process, and parents have to acknowledge and support children to do that as well, is talking about effort, praising, but also helping them understand how they might get to the right answer the next time.
Thanks, John. I think, children can't have too much praise, and it's a nice reminder to catch your children being good and giving them that feedback. Thanks. And of course, parents of children with additional health and development or learning needs are facing extra challenges, and that is a topic that we do want to explore further in the series. So I encourage people to subscribe to the podcast series so you don't miss that. We're also hearing a lot about primary school age children, certainly on Raising Children Network Facebook, that children are missing their friends. They're missing their play dates and sleepovers and school time, playtime. So Margie, why is it important that children do stay connected with their buddies during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think this is really key, especially for primary school age children. Friendships really give kids a sense of belonging and build their self-esteem, and help them also to develop those skills to get along with others. So it's important that they try and maintain contact with their friends. Interestingly, in my household at the start of the quarantine period, I found the kids were really excited almost about being home with their siblings and baking and playing games. And, there was this sense of kind of elation almost with the novelty of being home. I really noticed that a lot over Easter. But since then, I've seen them, get flatter and really miss their friends. And, texting does not replace a conversation or hanging out with your peers. And so I think it's really important as parents that we try and replace those play dates and sleepovers and a lot of that contact sport. Kids are really missing their netball or their footy. And the way we can do that is by connecting them to little WhatsApp chat groups. And if you're not sure about that technology, you can just do it with a simple phone and add kids onto the call so that they can chat with their friends. There are lots of other creative things that kids can be doing. My 10-year-old has been knitting whilst online with Zooming with her friends. They can, even take the phone or the computer outside and do something in the garden or throw a ball or shoot netball, or basketball hoops or anything. But I think really encouraging them to connect with their friends, laugh with them, chat with them is so important for them to have a sort of a sense of normality, because this is such a strange situation. And even though we're telling kids it won't last forever, I think in many ways they are feeling like it's sort of dragging on now. So I'm sure parents have lots of creative ways that they're trying to connect them with their friends. It's really important.
Thanks, Margie. John, do you have anything to add about perhaps being a parent of a younger age child, how parents might be able to help their young primary school age children stay connected with their friends?
Yeah, so I guess very similar to Margie, where for our child that we've organised some regular play dates via Zoom, where the children can just connect to each other and that they can talk about their days and what they've been up to. As well as being able to, I guess, making sure that when they are connected to their friends that way, that they're sharing their feelings and really encouraging them to talk to their friends about their own feelings, because as well as, can I start that again?
Yeah, do, yeah.
So very similar to Margie, where with our young child who's in grade 1, we have organised regular play dates for him via Zoom, where he can share with his friends about what he's been doing, and they can just have a general chat. So you'll be surprised we've been quite surprised how long a 6-year-old can stay on the phone for with his friends, that they've spent close to an hour just chatting and just sharing and just telling each other stories, and even just playing make-believe on the phone has been something he's really enjoyed as well. So they now have superheroes that they share with each other, and they go on adventures. So just letting their child have those connections and letting their imagination take over has been one way we've had those connections.
Great, thank you for that. And to a very common question on parents' minds that we are hearing a lot about is, we know digital technology is a great way to learn as well as keeping kids connected. But at the moment, how much screen time is too much, John?
I get asked this question a lot. And the principles we tend to go back to is that screen time can be perfectly is able to be part of a healthy lifestyle, and that for young children, it's really about what they're using that screen time for and what type of content they're accessing. So we know from the research that if they are accessing apps where they can read, or that they are engaging in learning materials, that there's nothing wrong with using screen time for that. But it's when you start potentially accessing media which is not age appropriate that it really becomes a problem for these young children. And it's really important for parents to be aware of what type of activities the child is having online, what type of content that they're accessing, and really having a close eye on that. As well as there are also other general principles of when it is and isn't appropriate to have screen time. So we know for a child's sleep that it's really important not to have any screen time in that hour before a child's bedtime. because of the blue light that is emitted from a lot of these screens, as well as ensuring that that hour before bedtime is a time that the child can relax down, and it's much easier to do that through reading a book, having bath time together, and conversations. So so the current recommendation is that there's a recognition that children will have increased screen time, but it's ensuring that they have a real balance between screen time, but also outside activities as well. And when they are using the screens, that it's about what they're accessing.
Okay, so really you're talking about quality, like screen practices, perhaps more than screen time, and quality screen experiences as well. I think that's an important point that you mentioned about balance. I mean, parents already know a lot about how to balance, healthy eating, having their kids physically active, active time, downtime, and so on. So, and going to your points before about connecting with friends, it's sounding like it's okay to be a bit flexible around screen practice at the moment. Margie, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I was also going to make that point about the balance with physical activity. I mean, I think we all have to accept that it's hard to stick to strict guidelines regarding screen time at the moment because of this need that they're having to spend so much time online for school. But I think that balance and encouraging them to get outside, to run around the garden or to go around the block or to the park with the dog is really important, to actually try and formalise that as part of the day, as part of the routine. It can sort of break that screen time a bit more naturally than constantly harping on them to get off the screen, which is what I find I'm doing. But I'm trying to just encourage them to be more physically active.
Okay, and primary school age children are accustomed to being online through their learning and at school and often at home as well. So the issue of online safety is very much in parents' minds at the moment, we know that. So what are some of the checks that parents can do to keep their primary school age children safe online, Margie?
I think it's really important that we're actually aware of what our children are doing online, and that it's a part of your interaction with your child, so that they don't feel that they're being spied on or checked on. So you're sort of naturally checking all the time on what screens they're accessing, and that it's part of what they expect, that you're going to check on what they're doing and to restrict the content they see. And I think that sort of can limit the pushback that you sometimes get from a child if it's part of their usual routine. And I think, it's important for parents to follow the schools' online safety advice. Schools are giving parents a lot of guidance around this. And of course, we would recommend that games and websites and TV programs can be checked by looking at reviews on common sense media. And that also we can teach them about risks and how to manage these in an age-appropriate way for parents. And they can look at the eSafety Commission website. I think are really terrific resources for parents to be aware of. But I think, as parents, unfortunately, it's our responsibility to be very engaged in this and to be very aware of what our kids are doing, because they do, if they have unregulated access to the internet, can access all sorts of material that we might not be wanting them to access.
Okay, thanks for that. I think we all understand that some parents and children both actually are reporting and are starting to talk about or show signs of anxiety over the last few weeks. So I'm wondering, a question for both of you, what suggestions do you have for both parents and children to help reduce anxiety and to boost wellbeing? John, can we start with you?
Yeah, one thing we really recommend is, and we've mentioned a couple of times, is talking to your child, and that talk to them about how they're feeling about the situation, and then assuring them that that this time will pass, that the timeline is uncertain at the moment, but this period will pass, and it's really important to also acknowledge how they're feeling and the reasons for that as well. And this can change from a daily basis for young children. I know that, once again, with my year one student, that some days he is anxious about the situation, other days he's less so. And it's really important to acknowledge that they do have different feelings on different days, and that it's just part of, I guess, human nature that we will have these feelings. As well as thinking about, although we are restricted in what we can do at the moment, finding things that your child can enjoy and do. For, once again, my child, Lego Masters is a very big thing at the moment, and we have, he likes playing with Lego, and we are having Lego challenges. And that's really one way that it's been able to help him to relax, as well as away from to switch off from his schoolwork, but also the other worries that he's got as well. So really helping children to acknowledge their emotions, but then finding ways for them to relax and to find enjoyment in the current situation.
Okay, so tuning into your child is a good rule of thumb in that case. Margie, what would you add to that?
I think we've talked a little bit about the importance of routine. I think routine really helps to reduce anxiety if kids have a sort of a structure and a framework, on which to build their day around. And as I said, really prioritising them staying physically active and having contact with their friends, really important. I also think making sure that they're eating well and that they're not going to bed too late. So prioritising sleep. And as John said earlier, limiting screen time before they go to sleep. These are all really important practical things that actually can reduce anxiety a lot. But I would say also it's very important to limit their exposure to very graphic and frightening information on coronavirus. I think sometimes what can be on the news or that they can see in the paper can actually be quite frightening. So we really need to try and regulate some of that more scary information, and as I said, try and correct misinformation as well.
Terrific. I know researchers at MCRI are already mobilising and very busy and hard at work on being able to follow up these issues with children and families long term. Look, that was a really helpful discussion with lots of very practical tips. Thank you,
Julie.
both.
I just thought actually I might, if it's all right, mention a little bit about some of the work that is being done at MCRI to look at this, because the sort of long-term impacts on mental health for kids is something that MCRI is looking quite closely at, the anxiety and depression, and also in more vulnerable children. So there is actually a lot of work being done to get in touch with these families through existing what we call cohort studies where kids are followed up for a long period of time, but also other kids that are coming into the hospital for testing or being seen on the wards. So we are really trying to be proactive in helping and monitoring around some of these really scary social impacts and mental health impacts for kids and families.
Well, that was a really helpful discussion with lots of tips. Thank you both for joining me today. I'd also like to thank Medibank for their support in making the podcast possible. If you've got some tips and tricks that you'd like to share with us, email us at podcasts@mcri.edu. Email us at podcasts@mcri.edu.au. And for further information on any of the issues we've talked about today, visit raisingchildren.net.au. Other sources of reliable information on any of these topics can be found at the Beyond Blue website, at health.gov.au, esafety.gov.au and 1800-RESPECT. Please share the series with anyone you think who'll find it useful, and we're going to be back soon talking about COVID and parenting for parents of secondary school-aged children. Thanks for joining us.